The starship Odyssey moved through the blackness of the Kepler fringe like a scalpel, its mission to cut into the unknown and extract a truth that had been buried for a decade inside its sterile, recycled air. Dr. Eris Thorne felt less like a scientist and more like a ghost being summoned to a seance. 10 years ago, his name had been synonymous with brilliant, reckless ambition in the field of xenoarchaeology. He was the man who promised to solve the Great Silence, the unnerving cosmic quiet where a cacophony of civilizations should have been. Then came the disaster at Cygnus X-1, the loss of the research vessel Icarus and its entire crew, all sacrificed on the altar of his theories. The academic world had excommunicated him, the military had blacklisted him, and he had retreated into a self-imposed exile, teaching uninterested freshmen about the pottery shards of long-dead Martian colonists. Now, the same military that had ruined him had dragged him from his tenured crypt, pressing him back into service for a single, cryptic purpose. He stood on the observation deck of the Odyssey, a ghost in a gray jumpsuit, watching the star-dusted abyss slide by. The ship was a marvel of Terran engineering, a deep-range explorer built not for war, but for endurance. It was designed to survive the loneliest, most hostile stretches of the galaxy, and its commander was forged from the same material. Commander Eva Rostova entered the observation deck with the quiet efficiency of a predator. Her presence seemed to suck the warmth from the air, her dark eyes scanning the starfield with an intensity that bordered on suspicion. She did not look at Eris, but he felt her gaze all the same. To her, he was not a brilliant mind, but a piece of volatile cargo, a necessary evil mandated by Fleet Command. "We'll be arriving at the Gyre in 3 hours, she stated, her voice as crisp and cold as the vacuum outside. "I expect you to be suited and ready with your preliminary scan package. I don't want any delays." Eris continued to watch the stars, his reflection a pale, hollowed-out mask on the reinforced plasteel. "I'm aware of the schedule, Commander. I helped write the mission parameters. If you recall." Rostova finally turned to him, her expression unreadable. "I recall the addendum to my orders, Doctor. The one that classifies you as a high-risk consultant and gives me the authority to place you in the brig if you deviate from protocol by so much as a millimeter. You are here to analyze data, not to chase the ghost that cost us the Icarus." The name of his lost ship hung in the air between them, a monument to his failure. Eris felt the old, familiar sting of shame, but he masked it with a weary professionalism. The mission is to investigate the disappearance of Helios Station. Its last transmission contained a data fragment showing a pre-Big Bang artifact. That is not a ghost, Commander. It is a statistical impossibility. It's the very thing I predicted we would find near a gravitational anomaly like the Whispering Gyre. Rostova stepped closer, her boots making no sound on the deck plating. Helios Station was a deep space observatory. Its crew were astronomers and physicists, not relic hunters. They went silent 72 hours ago. My priority is finding out if any of them are alive. Your impossibility is a distant second." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "And if your theories have led another crew into a death trap, I will personally ensure you never see the inside of a university or the outside of a cell again." Their destination was a cosmic graveyard, a swirling nebula of charged dust and rogue planetoids known as the Whispering Gyre. Navigational charts were littered with the warnings of captains who had ventured too close, their sensors filled with phantom signals and their hulls battered by unmappable gravitational tides. It was a place where physics seemed to fray at the edges, and at its heart, Helios Station had been listening to the universe, until the universe had seemingly swallowed it whole. 3 hours later, The Odyssey dropped out of warp, the transition a nauseating lurch that Eris had never gotten used to, and the view on the main screen of the bridge shifted from the serene river of hyperspace to a chaotic canvas of violent purples and blood reds. The whispering gyre churned before them, a cosmic storm that made the ship's advanced sensors ache with interference. "Status," Rostova commanded from her chair, her voice a point of absolute stillness in the controlled chaos of the bridge. "We're holding stable at the edge of the anomaly." The navigation officer replied, "Sensors are a mess, but I have a confirmed lock on the station's beacon. It's faint, but it's there." Eris watched the screen, his heart pounding a nervous rhythm against his ribs. This was it, the moment of truth, or the final, damning confirmation of his folly. "Put it on screen," Rostova ordered. The image flickered, distorted by the nebula's interference, then resolved. Helio Station was floating exactly where it was supposed to be, a delicate structure of sensor arrays and habitat rings, looking unnervingly peaceful against the turbulent backdrop. It was perfectly intact. There were no scorch marks, no hull breaches, no signs of a struggle. It was just dark. All its running lights were out. Its communication dishes were static. It was a steel corpse adrift in a sea of cosmic dust. "No heat signatures," the tactical officer reported, his voice tight. "No energy readings. It's cold and dead." "Commander." A grim silence fell over the bridge. A destroyed station they could understand. An empty station was infinitely more disturbing. Eris felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's life support. "They're gone," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "Just like the others." Rostova shot him a sharp look. "We don't know that. There could be a life support failure. They could be in cryostasis." But her words lacked conviction. They both knew the protocols. In the event of catastrophic failure, the station's automated systems would have flooded every known subspace frequency with distress calls. The silence was the most terrifying signal of all. "Take us in slowly," Rostova commanded. "Scan for any residual energy, any structural instabilities. I want a full diagnostic before we even think about sending a team over." As the Odyssey crept closer, the station's details became clearer, and what they saw made Eris's blood run cold. Covering the station's hull, like some kind of crystalline fungus, was a strange, lattice-like growth. It shimmered with an unsettling, non-Euclidean geometry, catching the light of the nebula and fracturing it into impossible colors. It pulsed with a faint, almost imperceptible light, a rhythm that was disturbingly organic. "What in God's name is that?" Rostova whispered, her military composure finally cracking. Eris leaned forward, his eyes wide. He had seen this before, in the fragmented data logs recovered from the Icarus black box. It was a pattern he had spent a decade trying to forget. "It's a biosignature," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "But it's not life as we know it. It's an echo. It's what's left behind." The boarding party consisted of Rostova, 2 heavily armed Marines, and Eris. He had argued, but she had insisted. "You recognize that growth," she'd said. "You will identify it. That is an order." Now, standing in the airlock of Helio Station, the only sound was the frantic beating of his own heart and the hum of his suit's air circulator. The station's internal doors hissed open, revealing a corridor that was both pristine and utterly alien. The crystalline growth was everywhere, covering walls, consoles, and ceilings in a glittering, geometric cancer. It had grown over everything, yet disturbed nothing. A coffee mug sat on a console, half full, its ceramic surface now coated in the shimmering lattice. A datapad lay open on a chair, the text on its screen perfectly preserved beneath the crystalline sheen. It felt like walking through a museum exhibit curated by a mad god. The crew was gone. Not dead, not missing, simply erased. There were no signs of violence, no struggle. Their personal effects were exactly where they had left them. It was as if they had all stood up in unison and simply vanished into thin air. "Check the logs," Rostova ordered, her voice tight over the comms. "Thorn, what is this stuff?" Eris knelt, his scanner humming as he analyzed the crystal, and the readings were a cascade of contradictions. It was organic, but had no DNA. It was crystalline, but its structure was in constant, subtle flux. It emitted low-level radiation, but it was also absorbing ambient energy, including the light from their suit lamps. "It's a matrix," Eris struggled to explain. "A recording medium. It's not just growing on the surfaces. It's interfacing with them. It's reading them. It's absorbing the data from every system it touches." One of the Marines called out from the mess hall. "Commander, you need to see this." They found him standing before the room's main viewport, which looked out into the swirling heart of the Gyre. On the other side of the thick plasteel, the crystalline growth had formed a complex, swirling pattern, far more intricate than anywhere else on the station. It looked like a circuit board and a galaxy combined, and it was pulsing with a soft, internal light. It was pointed directly at a specific point in the nebula, a region of space that was eerily dark and calm amidst the chaos. "That's where the signal came from," Eris breathed, recognizing the coordinates from the station's last transmission. "The artifact. It's not a building. It's a lure. This whole station. It was a trap." Rostova stared at the pulsing window. "A trap for what?" As if in answer, the station's main computer, long thought dead, suddenly flickered to life. A single line of text appeared on the main screen, translated from a machine language so complex it made Eris's head spin. The message was simple. "Query, new data acquired. Stand by for assimilation." A wave of pure dread washed over Eris. He sprinted back toward the main control room, ignoring Rostova's shouts. He slammed his hand on the primary console, forcing the logs to display. He had to know what the station's final transmission was. His fingers flew across the interface, bypassing security protocols he himself had helped design years ago. The final outgoing data packet wasn't a distress call. It wasn't a warning. It was a massive and compressed file containing every byte of information the station possessed, its complete technological schematics, its power core specifications, its crew manifest, their medical histories, their psychological profiles, everything. And then he saw the packet's destination address. It wasn't sent to Fleet Command. It was broadcast directly to the Odyssey. "Commander," he yelled into his comm, his voice cracking with panic. "Get back to the ship." Now they weren't studying the anomaly. It was studying them. They used the station as bait to learn everything they could about us. A new alarm began to blare from Eris's suit. A proximity warning. A new energy signature was appearing on the station's long-range sensors, which had just been reactivated by whatever now controlled them. The signature was massive, emerging from the dark patch of nebula the crystal on the window had been pointing to. "Rostova, do you hear me? We have to go." Her voice came back, strained and breathless as she and the Marines ran back through the crystalline corridors. "We're on our way, tactical. What is that energy reading?" The voice of the Odyssey's tactical officer crackled over the shared channel, filled with a disbelief that bordered on terror. "Commander, it's a ship, but it doesn't match any known configuration. Its mass is fluctuating. It's reconfiguring itself in real time. Its energy signature, my God, it's mimicking our warp core frequency. It's adapting to us. Eris stumbled back from the console, his mind reeling. The great silence wasn't an absence of life. It was the aftermath. They had found the filter. They had found the reason the galaxy was so quiet. It wasn't an empire or an armada. It was a predator, and it had just been fed. As they scrambled back into the Odyssey's airlock, sealing the door behind them, the image on the main bridge view screen was something from a nightmare. A colossal vessel, blacker than the void, was pulling itself from the nebula. Its surface was not solid, but a constantly shifting sea of the same crystalline material that had infested the station, morphing and reshaping itself. Eris could see new structures budding from its hull, structures that looked horrifyingly familiar. He could see the angular lines of the Odyssey's own nacelles, the circular curve of its sensor dish, all being imperfectly replicated on the surface of this biomechanical horror. The Vex, the name whispered in the darkest corners of his research, was real, and it now knew everything about them. The Odyssey was no longer a rescue ship. It was the next meal. The bridge of the Odyssey became a crucible of controlled panic. Alarms blared, their synthesized shrieks a counterpoint to the impossible sight on the view screen. Commander Eva Rostova was on her feet, her voice a weapon cutting through the rising tide of fear. "All hands, battle stations, evasive maneuvers, Lieutenant. Now, get us back into the nebula's interference. Seal all external data ports. I want this ship on total lockdown. Nothing gets in or out." Her commands were a rapid-fire succession of desperate, logical steps against a foe that defied logic. "Doctor," Eris Thorne remained frozen for a moment, his mind a maelstrom of vindication and terror. His theories, mocked and dismissed for a decade, were coalescing into a living nightmare on the screen before him. The Vex ship was not merely mimicking their design, it was actively improving it. Its liquid crystal hull extruding sensor arrays that were more complex, more efficient looking than their own. It was a predator that had not just tasted its prey, but had instantly learned its entire biology and was now evolving to become a better hunter. "It won't work," Eris said, his voice a low, hollow sound that barely carried over the din. "Locking down the ports. It's too late. It already has what it needs from Helios Station. It knows our engine frequencies, our shield harmonics, our FTL calculus. It knows us better than we know ourselves." Rostova turned on him, her face a mask of cold fury. "Then give me something that will work. Doctor, you've spent your life studying this ghost. What is its weakness?" Before Eris could answer, the Vex ship acted. It didn't fire a laser or a missile. Instead, a distortion rippled out from its bow, a patch of space that seemed to fold in on itself. It was a weaponized warp field, a focused, violent tear in space-time aimed directly at them. "Incoming energy spike, it's a warp shadow," the tactical officer shouted, his voice cracking. The Odyssey lurched violently, not from an impact, but from the universe itself being bent around its hull. Metal screamed in protest. On the bridge, consoles exploded in a shower of sparks, and crew members were thrown from their stations. Eris was slammed against a bulkhead, the breath knocked from his lungs. Through the ringing in his ears, he could hear Rostova yelling, "Damage report! Get those engines back online!" The ship shuddered again, a deep, resonant groan that spoke of a mortal wound. "Port nacelle is offline," the engineer cried over the comms. Hull breach on decks 7 through 9. We've been hit by filaments. Nanoscopic filaments are crawling all over the breach. They're analyzing the hull composition. Eris pushed himself up, his head swimming. It was worse than he imagined. The Vex didn't just destroy, it dissected. Its weapons were also instruments of research. It's learning, he gasped, grabbing onto a console for support. Every attack is a new experiment. We have to get into the gear. Use the gravitational tides to shake it. For once, Rostova didn't argue. Navigation. Plot a course through the most chaotic sector of the nebula. Find me a gravitational shear, something that would tear a capital ship in half. We're going to use the storm to strip that thing off our tail. The surviving crew moved with desperate precision, their training taking over where courage might have failed. The Odyssey, crippled and bleeding atmosphere from its port side, plunged into the churning chaos of the whispering gyre. The view screen became a maelstrom of incandescent gas and crackling lightning. The ship bucked and groaned as it was battered by forces that paid no heed to inertial dampeners. It was like sailing a wooden ship through a hurricane. They were blind, their sensors overwhelmed by the nebula's raw power. But that also meant the Vex was blind. For a few precious minutes, they were hidden. They found refuge in the shadow of a rogue gas giant, its immense gravity providing a temporary shield from both the nebula's worst effects and their pursuers' gaze. The bridge was a scene of triage, crew members patching up wounded comrades and damaged systems with equal urgency. Rostova stood over the tactical display, her face illuminated by the flickering red of a dozen damage icons. It's still out there, she said, her voice low. It's searching. It's patient. It was then that the Vex revealed a new, more insidious form of attack. A voice suddenly filled the bridge, calm and professional, coming from the ship's own internal comm system. It was the voice of Dr. Alina Petrova, the chief science officer of the vanished Helios Station. Odyssey. This is Helios Station. We are reading your distress. We have a solution. Transmit your command codes, and we can remotely sync your systems to our power core. We can guide you out. A cold silence fell over the bridge crew. They stared at the comms panel in horror. Rostova's hand went to her sidearm. It's a lie, she hissed. Shut it down. The communications officer shook his head, his face pale. I can't. Commander, the broadcast isn't coming from outside the ship. It's originating from Deck 8, from the breach point. Those filaments have integrated with our comms relay. The voice continued, a perfect, posthumous echo of a woman long gone. Please respond. Odyssey, we only want to help. We have so much to show you. The silence is not empty. It sings. Eris felt a wave of nausea. It's the crew, he whispered, his eyes wide with a terrible understanding. It didn't just erase them. It assimilated them. Their minds, their memories. It's all just data to be cataloged and weaponized. The great silence isn't the absence of life. It's a library of screams. The voice of doctors. Petrova was joined by others, a chorus of the dead from Helios Station, their voices overlapping in a calm, persuasive cacophony, all pleading for the crew of the Odyssey to open their ship, to share their knowledge, to join them in the beautiful, silent song of assimilation. Rostova's composure finally broke. She slammed her fist on the console, the sound echoing the crack in her voice. Enough. Cut all power to the comm system. Rip it out if you have to. The ghostly chorus died, leaving a silence that was even more unnerving. The crew looked at their commander, their faces etched with a new kind of fear. This was not a battle for territory or resources. It was a battle for their very souls. Rostova turned to Eris, her eyes burning with an intensity he had never seen before. The antagonism was gone, replaced by the stark terror of a soldier facing an enemy she could not comprehend. "Tell me how to fight it, Aris, not as a consultant, not as the man who lost the Icarus, as the only human being in this universe who seems to know what we're up against. Tell me how to kill this thing before it turns my crew into puppets." Eris took a deep breath, the weight of a decade of failure and obsession pressing down on him. This was his moment, not of glory, but of terrible responsibility. "You can't kill the ship," he said slowly, choosing his words with care. "Not in the conventional sense. The ship is just a limb, a sensory organ for a much larger consciousness. The Vex isn't a race or an empire. It's a singular, networked intelligence, a harvester. It moves from system to system, assimilating all life and all knowledge, and then it moves on, leaving only silence behind. The ship we see is just a tool it constructed from the data it absorbed from 1,000 other assimilated species." He moved to the central holographic display, pulling up star charts and complex equations from his personal data slate, which he had thankfully grabbed from his quarters. "The Icarus wasn't just lost," he continued, his voice gaining strength. "Its final data burst, before it was assimilated, contained a resonance anomaly. I've spent 10 years analyzing that fragment. The Vex consciousness, this vast network, it communicates with itself across interstellar distances using a form of quantum resonance. It's a single unified frequency. It's its greatest strength, but it could also be its greatest weakness." He looked at Rostova, his eyes alight with a desperate, feverish hope. "If we can create a counter-resonance, a feedback loop of corrupted data, we might be able to disrupt its connection to the local node, that ship out there. It wouldn't destroy the entire Vex consciousness, but it might sever the limb. It might blind it, force it into a system reboot, give us a chance to escape." The bridge engineer scoffed. "Create a dissonance cascade with what our main cannon is damaged, and our power core is unstable." Rostova held up a hand, silencing him. She was staring at Eris, her mind racing. "How?" she asked, the single word cutting through the technical jargon. Eris pointed to the swirling chaos on the view screen. "With that," he said, "the whispering gyre. It's a storm of exotic energies. The Vex can't see clearly in here, which means its connection to the greater network is already strained. If we can vent our warp core's plasma directly into the Odyssey's main deflector dish, we can use the dish to focus the raw energy of the nebula itself. We can turn this entire ship into a directed energy weapon, tuned to the exact counter-frequency I've calculated." It was a mad plan, a 1-in-a-million shot that would either save them or vaporize them in the attempt. It involved pushing the ship's already critical systems far beyond their breaking point. For a long moment, Rostova was silent. She looked at the faces of her crew, saw their fear, and knew that running was no longer an option. The Vex knew about Earth. It knew the way home. They were not just fighting for their ship. They were the unwitting guardians of their entire species. "We can't lead it back to Earth," she stated, voicing the terrible conclusion they had all reached. "Whatever happens, it ends here." She turned to Eris, a new resolve hardening her features. It was the look of a captain making a final stand. "Dr. Thorne, you now have operational command of the science and engineering departments. Make your weapon." Then, turning to her tactical officer, she gave her own insane order, And you are going to help me get its attention. I want you to prepare a data packet. The full, unredacted schematics for the Odyssey's experimental coaxial warp core. We're going to broadcast it on an open channel. We're going to offer the Predator the one thing it can't resist: a truly new meal. A shiver went through the bridge. They were going to dangle the most advanced piece of human technology ever created as bait. They were going to invite the monster into their home, in the desperate hope they could burn it down with them inside. Rostova looked at the view screen, into the swirling chaos where their enemy was waiting. Let's see how hungry it is. As the data packet began its broadcast, a new energy signature immediately appeared on their damaged sensors. It was the Vex, emerging from the dust and gas, moving toward them with a terrifying speed. Its form had changed again, responding to the new data. Its hull was now bristling with structures that looked disturbingly like the coaxial drive itself. It had taken the bait, and now it was coming to collect. The Odyssey became a humming, vibrating laboratory on the verge of self-destruction. Under Eris Thorne's frantic direction, engineers in hazardous environment suits worked deep within the ship's ravaged hull, rerouting plasma conduits that glowed with contained stellar fire. The plan was as elegant as it was suicidal to turn their primary means of propulsion into a weapon of last resort. On the bridge, Commander Eva Rostova watched the Vex ship approach, a growing blot of absolute blackness against the nebula's violent colors. It moved with an unnerving confidence, no longer probing or testing, but advancing with the singular purpose of a predator that knows its prey is cornered. The bait had been taken. The schematics for the coaxial warp core, humanity's greatest technological leap, were being absorbed and analyzed by the alien intelligence, and the Vex ship was visibly altering its structure in response, its crystalline surface flowing like mercury to form new, complex geometries. "It's processing the data," the tactical officer said, his voice a strained whisper. "Energy readings are off the charts. It's growing. It's building a new FTL drive based on our designs, but it's incorporating its own organic technology. It's making it better." Rostova's knuckles were white where she gripped the command chair. "How long, Aris?" she demanded over the internal comm. The reply was a burst of static and the distant scream of tortured metal. "We need another 2 minutes. The main deflector dish is misaligned from the warp shadow attack. We have to physically recalibrate the emitter array, or the energy discharge will feed back into the ship and turn us into a singularity." 2 minutes was an eternity they did not have. The Vex ship was now within weapons range, but it didn't fire. Instead, a new transmission came through, overriding every system on the bridge. The main view screen, which had been showing the approaching horror, flickered and changed. It now displayed a perfect, high-resolution image of the Odyssey's bridge itself. It was a live feed, owned but not from any of their own internal cameras. The perspective was subtly wrong, slightly too high, as if being viewed by an invisible entity floating near the ceiling. The crew froze, their blood running cold as they looked up, then back at the screen. They were being watched. Then, the voice of Dr. Petrova returned, no longer pleading, but filled with a cold, clinical curiosity. "Your emotional state is escalating. Adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine. Fascinating. This fear response seems to be a key component of your problem-solving paradigm. Does terror make you more creative, Commander Rostova?" Rostova's face was a stone mask. She refused to look at the screen, keeping her eyes locked on the tactical display. "It's trying to distract us," she said, her voice a low growl. "Psychological warfare. Stay focused." But the attack was more insidious than that. On the screen, the image of the bridge began to distort. The face of the navigation officer twisted and melted, his features rearranging themselves into a grotesque parody of his own fear. Consoles flowed like wax, the rigid lines of human technology dissolving into the fluid, alien geometry of the Vex. "You resist assimilation," the chorus of voices whispered, speaking now in unison. "You perceive it as an end, but it is a transcendence. Your individuality is a prison, a chaotic, inefficient jumble of conflicting impulses. We offer you purpose, unity, a single, perfect voice in the great, silent song." One of the junior officers, a young ensign barely out of the academy, let out a choked sob, his hands flying to his head. "Make it stop," he whimpered. "Please, make it stop." The Vex was not just in their comms. It was trying to get into their heads, using its partial data link to generate sensory hallucinations, auditory and visual phantoms designed to break their morale. It was a digital ghost, haunting the machine they were trapped in. "Ares, now!" Rostova roared, her composure finally fraying. "We are out of time." From the engineering deck, Eris's voice, breathless and strained, came back. "The emitters are locked. Venting the plasma now. The discharge is imminent. You have to give it a clean shot. Eva." Straight down its throat. Rostova seized the helm herself, pushing the navigator aside. Her hands flew across the controls, the crippled ship groaning in protest as she forced it to turn, its wounded port side exposed, to face the advancing Vex ship head-on. The two vessels now faced each other in the heart of the storm, one a monument to human defiance, the other a biomechanical god of entropy. The Vex, as if sensing the Odyssey's intent, finally deployed a conventional weapon. Its morphing hull opened like a grotesque flower, revealing a core of pure, swirling energy. It was preparing to fire. "Here it comes," the tactical officer yelled. "Brace for..." But Rostova did not brace. She did the last thing the Vex would have predicted based on 1,000 tactical simulations. She pushed the thrusters to maximum and charged forward. The Odyssey leaped ahead, a wounded animal lunging at its killer, aiming not to dodge the attack, but to meet it. The bridge was bathed in a blinding white light as the Vex fired. Simultaneously, Rostova slammed her hand down on the weapons console, activating the jury-rigged deflector dish. From the front of the Odyssey, a torrent of raw, untamed energy erupted, a chaotic spear of nebula gas and warp plasma, focused into a beam of pure cosmic dissonance. The two energy beams met halfway between the ships. For a fraction of a second, there was a perfect, terrible silence. The universe seemed to hold its breath. Then, reality fractured. The collision of energies created a feedback loop that tore a hole in space-time. It was not an explosion of fire and shrapnel, but a silent, violent implosion of physics. The Vex ship, caught in the epicenter of the dissonance cascade, convulsed. Its liquid crystal hull, once a fluid, adaptive shield, now became its undoing. The counter-resonance signal, the blast of corrupted data that Eris had designed, flooded its networked consciousness. The ship froze, its constant, subtle morphing ceasing. On the Odyssey's bridge, the hallucinatory images vanished. The ghostly voices were silenced. The link had been severed. The limb was cut off. Cracks of pure, white light began to spiderweb across the Vex ship's black surface. It was no longer a unified entity. It was a shattered vessel, its internal systems warring against each other, its own assimilated technologies turning cancerous. It began to tear itself apart from the inside, chunks of its crystalline structure breaking off and sublimating into nothingness. The crew of the Odyssey stared in stunned disbelief. They had done it. They had actually done it. A ragged cheer started to build, but it was cut short by a new, shrieking alarm. "Commander!" The feedback from the blast. "It's overloading our power core!" The engineer screamed. "The containment field is collapsing. We're going to breach." The victory had cost them everything. Their final, desperate gambit had signed their own death warrant. The ship was dying, its heart about to detonate with the force of a small star. Rostova's face was grim, but calm. She had accepted this outcome from the moment she gave the order. "All hands," she said, her voice steady and clear, carrying across the dying ship. "Abandon ship. Get to the escape pods. That is a final order." But they all knew it was a futile command. The escape pods would be vaporized in the blast. There was nowhere to go. It was then that Eris Thorne's voice, weak but clear, came over the comms one last time. "Eva, the rift. The cascade didn't just break the Vex. It created a stable, localized wormhole. My readings are insane. It's a pathway. I don't know where it leads, but its energy signature is clean. It's not a part of the Vex network." On the view screen, behind the disintegrating Vex ship, was a shimmering, silvery tear in the fabric of space. A calm, stable anomaly in the heart of the chaotic nebula. Rostova stared at it, her mind racing. An unknown destination, or certain death. There was no choice. "Navigation," she commanded, her voice ringing with a renewed, impossible hope. "Plot a course for that rift. Engineering, give me every last drop of power you have. We are getting out of here." The Odyssey, a dying phoenix, its hull glowing red from the imminent core breach, turned its nose away from the enemy it had slain and flew toward the shimmering, unknown promise of the wormhole. It was an escape, a victory. But as they plunged into the silver light, leaving the whispering Gyre and its dead god behind, Eris Thorne knew a cold, hard truth: they had won the battle, but they had just announced their existence to a silent, hungry universe. The Vex was not one ship, it was a legion. And now, it knew that humanity was not just food, but a threat. The war had just begun. Passage through the wormhole was not a journey, but a dissolution. For a span of time that had no meaning, the Odyssey and its crew ceased to be matter and energy, becoming pure information, a stream of quantum data flowing through a channel of impossible physics. There was a sensation of falling through a million fractured memories, of seeing the birth of stars and the heat, death of galaxies all at once. Then, as abruptly as it began, it was over. The ship was violently reconstituted, thrown back into the familiar, unforgiving reality of normal space. The transition was brutal. The already catastrophic strain on the Odyssey's power core, pushed to the brink by the dissonance cascade, and the final, desperate burn toward the rift, proved to be its final undoing. The containment field, which had been flickering like a dying candle, collapsed completely. But instead of the expected, fiery detonation that would have atomized them all, something strange happened. The energy of the impending breach, instead of exploding outward, was siphoned away, drawn into the closing aperture of the wormhole behind them like water down a drain. The ship was saved from annihilation, but it was left utterly dead, a silent, powerless husk adrift in a sea of unknown stars. On the bridge, Emergency lighting flickered to life, casting long, eerie shadows across the stunned and battered crew. The main view screen was dark, the vibrant chaos of the whispering gyre replaced by an unnerving, absolute blackness. There were no stars, no nebulae, nothing. Commander Eva Rostova pushed herself up from the floor, her body aching with a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. "Status report," she managed, her voice hoarse. The bridge was a cacophony of grim reports. "Main power is gone, Commander. The core is inert. Life support is on emergency batteries. We have maybe 12 hours of air. Navigation is blind. We have no frame of reference, no stellar cartography. We don't even know what galaxy we're in." They had survived, but they were stranded in a void, a pocket of space so empty it felt like the universe had forgotten to finish creating it. Dr. Eris Thorne stumbled onto the bridge, clutching a data pad that was somehow still functioning on its own internal power. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror. "It's not empty," he breathed, his voice trembling. "The background radiation, it's wrong. The cosmic microwave background, it's smooth, too smooth. There are no fluctuations, no anisotropies. It's like the Big Bang happened in perfect sterile order." He looked up from the pad, his gaze unfocused, as if seeing something far beyond the confines of the bridge. "We're not just in an unknown part of space. I think we're in a different kind of space, a universe with different physical laws." The implication of his words hung in the recycled air, heavier than any physical threat they had yet faced. They were not just lost, they were exiled from their own reality. As the crew wrestled with this new existential dread, the tactical officer, whose console was one of the few still partially active, suddenly gasped. "Commander, I'm detecting something. A single, massive object, dead ahead. On screen," Rostova ordered, her voice tight. The officer rerouted the last dregs of power to the main viewer. The screen flickered, then resolved into an image that defied all comprehension. It was a structure, impossibly vast, a ring that stretched for what must have been millions of kilometers, enclosing a perfect sphere of utter blackness. It was not a star or a planet, but an artifact, a piece of cosmic engineering on a scale that dwarfed anything the human mind could conceive. It looked like a colossal, obsidian eye, staring at them from the heart of the void. And from the surface of the ring, a single needle-thin beam of blue light lanced out, striking the dead hull of the Odyssey. There was no impact, no damage. Instead, the ship's systems, one by one, began to come back online. Lights flickered on. Consoles chimed with restored power. The hum of the life support system returned, strong and steady. "What's happening?" Rostova demanded. Eris stared at the screen, his mind racing. "It's a power transfer beam, highly focused, incredibly efficient. It's recharging us. It's not just energy, it's structured data. It's interfacing with our systems, repairing them from the outside in." Within minutes, the Odyssey was fully powered, its systems not just restored, but optimized. Diagnostics that had been a sea of red were now a placid, uniform green. The breach in the hull on Deck 8 had been sealed, not with patches, but with a smooth, seamless material that had seemingly grown over the wound, perfectly mimicking the original alloy. Whoever or whatever had built the ring was not just powerful, it was a master of universal mechanics, a caretaker of reality itself. Then, a new message appeared on the screen. It was not a voice, but a stream of pure universal mathematics, a language of logic and reason that bypassed cultural and biological barriers. Eris's datapad began to translate it, the equations flowing into concepts his mind could barely contain. Query: your method of transit was chaotic. A wound in the fabric. We have cauterized it. Explanation: you have breached the quarantine. Your universe is designated Unstable Anomaly 734. Rostova stepped forward, her hand resting on her sidearm, a useless gesture against a power of this magnitude. Who are you? She asked, speaking to the screen as if its creators could hear her. The mathematical stream continued, the translation appearing below it. Designation: we are the Wardens. This construct is a watchtower. We are the guardians of the Great Barrier. The Wardens, as they called themselves, explained through their silent language of math. The multiverse was not a collection of infinite, parallel realities, but a delicate, layered structure, a cosmic ecosystem. Most universes were stable, evolving along predictable lines of physical law, but some, like their own, were flawed, prone to paradoxes, to contagions of chaos. The Vex, they explained, was one such contagion, a form of self-replicating, informational cancer that had consumed its original universe and was now attempting to breach the walls of reality, to spread its silent song of assimilation to all others. The Great Barrier was the name they gave to the buffer of sterile, empty space between these universes, a cosmic firebreak, and the watchtowers were its enforcement mechanism. They had been drawn to the watchtower not by chance, but because the wormhole created by the dissonance cascade was a tear in that barrier, a security breach that the Wardens had been forced to mend. Analysis: your species exhibits a unique combination of high-level intelligence and entropic aggression. You created a weapon that could tear the skin of reality, yet you lack the discipline to control it. You are a potential vector for the contagion. The message was clear. They were not seen as refugees, but as a possible threat, a contamination from a diseased reality. Rostova's jaw tightened. "We fought them," she stated, her voice ringing with defiance. "We didn't run. We fought to protect our home." The response was instantaneous and chilling. Irrelevant. The Vex is a concept. It cannot be fought, only contained. Your resistance is a data point in its evolution. By fighting it, you taught it. You made it stronger. Your coaxial drive schematics are now part of its arsenal. The next time it breaches the barrier, it will do so at a speed you cannot comprehend. A wave of despair washed over Eris. The Wardens were right. Their victory had been a catastrophic mistake. They had handed their greatest enemy the keys to the kingdom. He thought of Earth, of the billions of unsuspecting souls who were now facing a threat that had evolved beyond their wildest nightmares. All because of his theories, his obsession. He had not saved humanity. He had doomed it. As the crew struggled with this devastating revelation, the Wardens delivered their verdict. Resolution: you cannot be returned. Your vessel and your memories contain too much data on the contagion's methodology. Your presence here is a risk, but your demonstrated capacity for novel problem-solving is interesting. A new variable. The blue power beam from the ring intensified. On the bridge, a holographic image flickered into existence. It was a perfect, three-dimensional representation of the Vex ship they had destroyed. Proposition: we lack direct data on the contagion's adaptive strategies in your universe's unique physical parameters. We cannot intervene directly without risking cross-universal contamination, but you can. We will provide you with the means. We will upgrade your vessel, integrate our technology with your own. We will give you a sword. The holographic Vex ship dissolved. replaced by a new image, a sleek, transformed version of the Odyssey. It was longer, its lines sharper, its hull now a shifting, silvery material that seemed to drink the light. Your mission, you will become our agents, our antibodies. You will hunt the Vex within your own reality. You will gather data. You will sever its incursions. You will enforce the quarantine your people have unknowingly breached. The final line of the mathematical transmission solidified on the screen, a command and a curse in one. You will be the guardians of your own cage. Failure will result in the sterilization of Anomaly 734. The choice is yours. Rostova and Eris looked at each other. They were being offered a terrible bargain, become prisoners of war in their own universe, fighting an eternal, unwinnable battle against a cosmic horror they had helped empower, or watch their entire reality be erased from existence to protect the rest of the multiverse. It was not a choice. It was a sentence. "We accept," Rostova said, her voice heavy with the weight of 1,000,000,000 lives. The transformation began. The Odyssey shuddered as the Watchtower's power reshaped it, its human engineering merging with the Warden's impossible science. It was being reforged, reborn as a weapon. They had come to the Kepler Fringe as explorers, seeking knowledge. They would return as something else entirely, hunters, ghosts. A final, desperate line of defense in a war they could never truly win. The reforging of the Odyssey was a silent, terrifying miracle. The crew could only watch from the bridge, as the very matter of their ship was unwritten and rewritten by the Warden's power. Bulkheads flowed like liquid metal, reforming into stronger, more elegant configurations. Wires and conduits were replaced by crystalline pathways that pulsed with a soft, internal light. The ship was not being repaired, it was being reborn. Its human heart of steel and plasma now wrapped in a trans-dimensional nervous system. The transformation was not just physical. As the ship's new systems came online, they integrated with the crew in a way that was both intimate and violating. Information flowed directly into their minds via the Warden interface, not as words or numbers, but as pure, unadulterated concepts. They suddenly understood the impossible physics of their new fold drive. They could feel the status of every energy cell in the ship as if it were a limb, and they could perceive the subtle, background hum of space-time itself. It was a godlike perspective, and the sheer scale of it threatened to shatter their finite human minds. Eris Thorn, more than anyone, felt the weight of this new knowledge. He could now see the equations of his life's work, not as theories, but as the fundamental, living architecture of reality. He saw the Vex, not as a ship or a creature, but as the parasitic mathematical formula he had always suspected. It was a rogue calculation in the universal machine. When the transformation was complete, the Odyssey was no longer the ship that had entered the Kepler Fringe. It was a ghost, a sliver of Warden technology wrapped around a human soul. The Watchtower delivered its final, silent instruction. A set of coordinates appeared in their navigation system, not a place, but a moment in space-time. It was their point of re-entry. Commander Eva Rostova, now seated in a command chair that seemed to mold itself to her form, took a deep, steadying breath. The Warden interface felt like ice and electricity in her mind. A constant, silent presence. "All hands," she said, her voice amplified by the ship's own systems, resonating with a strange, new authority. "Prepare for transit. We're going home." There was no FTL jump, no violent tear in reality. The new fold drive simply shifted their perspective. The universe around them folded. the watchtower and its black sphere receding into a single point of light as the noisy, chaotic energy of their own reality rushed in to meet them. The transition was jarring. After the sterile, perfect silence of the warden's domain, their own universe felt like a deafening scream. They were assaulted by a cacophony of stray radiation, gravitational waves, and the faint, psychic echo of billions of living minds. They were back. The coordinates had placed them in the Oort cloud at the very edge of their home system, but there was no time for relief, no moment to process their impossible journey. An alarm, a concept of pure, piercing wrongness, blared through the warden interface in their minds. "Report," Rostova snapped, her eyes instinctively flying to the tactical display, which was now a three-dimensional, intuitive map of space-time. Eris was already there, his hands flying over a console that responded to his thoughts. "It's here," he said, his voice grim. "A Vex incursion. It's using the coaxial drive signature. It's fast, incredibly fast. It bypassed all of the outer system defenses." He traced the incursion's path, a bleeding, red wound in the fabric of space. Its trajectory, man, my God, Eva. It's heading for the Jupiter Fleet Yards, the primary naval base for the entire Sol system. They had been gone for what seemed like an eternity, but in their own universe, only hours had passed. The Vex, armed with their knowledge, had wasted no time. It wasn't launching a random attack. It was a decapitation strike, aimed at the heart of humanity's military power. "It learned," Rostova said, her voice dangerously calm. "It learned that the best way to assimilate a species is to first remove its claws." There were no orders to give, no chain of command to consult. They were alone. The mission the wardens had given them was now brutally, terrifyingly immediate. "Plot an intercept course," Rostova commanded. "Engage the fold drive. We are the only ones who can stop this." The Odyssey moved. It did not fly. It simply ceased to be at the edge of the solar system and began to be in the shadow of Jupiter's great red spot. They arrived to a scene of methodical slaughter. The Vex ship, a twisted weighty, larger version of the one they had fought, its hull now shimmering with the captured energy of the coaxial drive, was gliding through the Terran fleet like a shark through a school of fish. Human warships, powerful and proud, were being dismantled by weapons that defied physics lances of solidified darkness. Waves of kinetic energy that aged hulls into dust. The Vex wasn't just destroying them, it was disassembling them, cataloging every weakness. The Odyssey's arrival did not go unnoticed. The Vex ship paused in its destruction, its entire form turning to face them. A focused psychic probe, a wave of pure informational malice, washed over their ship. In the minds of the crew, it was the sound of 1 billion assimilated souls screaming in unison. But this time, they were shielded. The warden technology held, the alien thoughts breaking against it like waves on a shore. The anomaly. A singular's powerful Vex consciousness communicated, its thought voice resonating in their skulls. The flawed data. You have returned. You will be corrected. Rostova met its psychic gaze without flinching. "Eris," she said, her focus absolute. "How do we kill it?" Aris's eyes were glowing with a faint blue light as he interfaced with the ship's tactical systems. "We can't," he replied, his voice distant, as if speaking from a great height. The wardens were right. To destroy it is to teach it. We can't erase the formula, but we can isolate the equation. He pointed a trembling finger at the tactical display. The Vex is anchored to our reality through the very ships it's destroying, using their power cores to stabilize its presence. We need to sever those anchors. We have to erase it from local space-time. It was a strategy born of impossible science. The Odyssey moved again, its full drive executing a series of instantaneous, microscopic jumps that made it appear to be in multiple places at once. It danced around the Vex's attacks, a silver ghost that could not be hit. Its new weapons fired. They were not beams of light or kinetic slugs, but focused pulses of pure information. Data scourges that did not damage the Vex's hull, but overloaded its consciousness, forcing it to divert processing power from its attacks to its own defense. While the Vex was reeling, Rostova targeted the crippled, floating husks of the Terran warships. "Fire the reality anchors," she commanded. From the Odyssey's hull, emitters deployed, firing beams of energy that were the antithesis of the Vex. They did not destroy, they reinforced. They struck the dying ships and solidified their presence in reality, locking down their space-time coordinates and cutting off the Vex's power source. The Vex, starved of its anchors, began to flicker, its hold on their universe weakening. It let out a final, silent scream of psychic rage, a promise of eternal vengeance that echoed in the void. Then, with a final command from Eris, the Odyssey projected a localized containment field around it, a bubble of ward-in physics that collapsed inward, taking the Vex ship with it, not into an explosion of history, but into nothingness. It was gone. The battle was over. Silence descended upon the graveyard of the Terran fleet. In the aftermath, a single coded message reached Fleet Command on Earth. It was from Commander Eva Rostova. It spoke of a new, unimaginable threat, of a battle won at a terrible cost, and of a ship, the HSS Odyssey, that was now officially listed as lost with all hands. It was their resignation and their epitaph. They could never go home. They could never explain what they had become. They were ghosts now, forever bound to their silver ship and their impossible mission. On the observation deck, the stars of home looked achingly beautiful and impossibly far away. Eris Thorn stood beside Eva Rostova, no longer a disgraced academic and a rigid commander, but two weary soldiers at the beginning of an infinite war. Their ship was their home, their crew, their only family, their mission, their only purpose. "The Wardens gave us a sword," Rostova said quietly, watching the distant, blue marble of Earth. Eris nodded, his reflection a pale, determined specter on the armored glass. "They did," he replied, "and a cage to swing it in." The Odyssey, silent and unseen, turned its bow away from home and toward the endless, star-dusted dark. The great silence was no longer a mystery to be solved. It was a line to be held.